Hello and welcome to TRT World. I'm Jafar Hasnan, coming to you live from the heart of Damascus. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll bring you the latest news and analysis from across Syria. For the past 18 days since the fall of the Assad regime, the country has embarked on an uphill challenge to reconcile half a century of tyranny. Türkiye and the international community has pledged support. Global leaders are now all lining up to meet the leader of Syria's new administration. So a lot to discuss here, a lot to unpack. First and foremost, let's bring in TRT World's Ubaida Hito, who joins me live from Latakia. Ubaida, now this morning you left for Latakia. Of course, this is the first time you are going there. Tell me, what are you seeing over there right now?
Well, on the road here, we saw a lot of abandoned military vehicles. There were signs of major military clashes on the way, especially in rural Homos. And then once we got into Tartus and on the road towards Latakia, here in the city, it's a rainy day, as you can see, but the marketplace is actually full. This is the main and oldest roundabout in the city. Behind me, I don't know if you can actually see or not right now, but there used to be a large statue of Hafiz al-Assad, but it was brought down by the people here in Latakia soon after the regime toppled on December 8th. And you see this new Syria flag that's flying on the flagpole there. There's many banners and posters here in the center of the city, basically welcoming the toppling of the regime, slogans that say that the Syrian people are one and united. And in general, people have been positive here in Latakia. Latakia is a very unique place because it's the home of Bashar al-Assad, the toppled former leader of Syria. And this place has a large Alawite population, this minority sect that the Assad family is from. Many people were concerned that the I should say revenge attacks were going to be out of control here, but since the regime has toppled, there have been some security issues, but the interim government has been dealing with them quite well. Today, I feel safe here in Latakia. The people have been very kind and friendly. We even had breakfast here before coming on air with you, spoke to some of the locals. Even people from the Alawite sect are congratulating each other and congratulating the Syrian people for the fall of the Assad regime. They also experienced severe oppression and suppression by the Assad family. Just because they were Alawites, they weren't necessarily being treated well. Just yesterday, the interim government met with 60 leaders of the Alawite community here in Latakia to discuss some of these issues, especially related to security and people's individual rights. There is also a huge effort by the interim government to continue with this peaceful handover of power. Over 10,000 former regime soldiers have turned themselves in, as well as their weapons, here in Latakia province alone. And that number is expected to rise. There are even very high level officers that have turned themselves in. One of them, Talal Makhlouf, who turned himself in here in this province. And I expect more of those kinds of things to happen. The people here tell me they're not interested in engaging in any kind of violence. They don't want a sectarian war, and they say that they're happy that Assad is gone, and they're looking forward to better days here in Latakia and all around Syria.
Right. Right, Ubaida, stay with us. I think it's really important to remind our audience what has happened over the past 24 hours here in Syria. TRT World's Christina Smith gives us this daily wrap.
This is what politics looks like in a post-Assad Syria as it takes its steps towards recovery and integrity. High-ranking ministers from bordering nations meeting Syria's new leadership.
The Qatari side has voiced its readiness to begin large-scale investments on Syrian land in all fields, most importantly in the energy sector, where they have a high level of expertise on the global stage, but also investing in ports and airports and so forth. I believe the next stage will be one of exceptional growth.
It's been 2 weeks since Syrians celebrated the dramatic sudden death of a brutal dictatorship. Now war-weary Syrians quickly turn to a life of calm and normalcy. Interim leader Ahmed al-Sharaa, with the support of neighbours, are calling on global powers to help the nation overcome its problems, reassure its people, especially its minority groups, of a peaceful transition. starting with fixing the country's crippled economy to begin the reconstruction of infrastructure and livelihoods.
Washington gave actually a signal by lifting the bounty they put on Ahmed al-Sharaa, which is a good sign. Those sanctions pertaining to Caesar Act will follow if the interim government is committed to reform, is committed to the three conditions America is putting on one side: the right of the minority, and this seems to go, very well. The women's rights, the new government take a new decision by appointing a female minister, a woman as a minister of women affairs. And this seems to be on the right thing, and then to commit to a unified Syria.
Which means tackling terrorist groups that remain a concern.
There's no place for any terrorist organization, including Daesh and PKK-YPG, in the future of Syria and our region. The PKK-YPG terror group and its extensions will either abolish themselves or they will be liquidated.
Ensuring stability for Syria is going to require a united approach from the world.
The first indication from the new American administration is like they are determined to turn the page of wars in the Middle East, and there is an interest of Washington in having this Levant stabilized.
And hope that Syria's victims and families one day find peace and a new path for their country. Christina Simic, TRT World.
As you can see in the package, there's this intense diplomatic push from the new Syrian administration side. This is primarily why more and more leaders, ministers are coming to this very place, the Syrian capital, to engage in talks about Syria's new future. Meanwhile, the Syrian war has had a profound impact on the country, civilians and the region as well. But at the center of it all has been millions of children whose lives have been disrupted. This younger generation has paid the ultimate price, so let's break it all down. A UNICEF report shows that at least 2.5 million children in Syria are out of school, with 1.6 million more at the risk of dropping out. Budget allocation for education also declined by 78% in 2023. That's since the war started in 2011. UNICEF report also says that more than 1/3 of the schools in Syria have been damaged, destroyed, or repurposed as shelters or military bases. In 2021, UNICEF reported that there have been approximately 700 attacks on the schools, teachers, and other educational institutions. This lack of safe learning spaces has left millions without access to formal education. But the schools that have remained in operation despite the lack of the resources and basic infrastructure. Many teachers have fled the country for better opportunities and safety in other countries. A 2017 International Rescue Committee study shows that 59% of 6th graders were unable to read 2nd grade equivalent reading material. Similarly, 35% of 8th graders were unable to do so. And here in Damascus, I got the opportunity to speak to some university students about what they think for the future of the country. Here's what they told me.
As we see it, the educational process is set to improve. The curriculum will get better and outdated practices will be removed. All students are optimistic about what has happened, and God willing, job opportunities will open up for both male and female students.
We suffered from corruption, bribery, and a lack of basic necessities for a normal human life. Looking ahead, God willing, there will be improvement. The situation has already gotten better. For now, even though it's not widespread, we feel a little more secure than before.
I hope things improve further and for better opportunities to open up in Syria, to have our rights in the country, such as transportation, electricity, and the water and the basic services.
We didn't have these capabilities before. I hope the new government provides us with these resources, so we innovate and bring pride to our country, Syria.
Massive displacement as a result of the Syrian war has had a huge impact on the country. Disruption of their day-to-day lives has had a ripple effect on their overall development. We're talking about the young population of Syria. Let's break it all down, what they have faced over the past 13 years. Exposure to armed conflict has led to a loss of shelter, livelihood, and community. This has resulted in psychological trauma, including anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Without basic needs, Syrian youth are growing up with limited access to a stable education. Lowering future employment prospects, interrupted schooling has also led to a generation in despair, unable to contribute to rebuilding Syria. But despite the challenges, the youth have shown resilience, engaging in community building, education advocacy, and peace-building initiatives. Some have pursued education abroad through scholarships, creating opportunities for a better future. All right, so of course the youth of the country plays a very important role in Syria, especially when we talk about rebuilding the country. And to talk more about that, here joining me in Damascus, right in the heart of the city, is Selina Qasim. She's a Syrian activist. Selina, now I was reading about you. You have been very active in raising the plight of Syrians over the past 13 years. And even now you are at the forefront when it comes to raising their voice. When we talk about the youth of Syria, tell me, what is your navigation through the biggest challenge they're facing right now?
Thank you so much for having me. And I think that the biggest challenge today is that there's two challenges. There's the people that stayed here and there's the people that left. So the people that left, they lost a bit of their identity, their culture, their struggle as to what being Syrian feels like. You know, they had to leave and go through the hardest challenges, go through oceans, racism, you know, face very difficult situations. And then today, they are able to gain education, to gain the means as to which now they have a responsibility to come back to their country and be a part of the rebuilding. And the ones that stayed here, unfortunately, a lot of them, you know, are just simply trying to survive because of the economic situation, because of the enforced conscription that was under the Assad regime, the dehumanization of our youth, and how, especially the men, and when it comes to the army, and how they were forced to be conscripted and to be a part of that system of machinery of death.
Right. Now, you know, on our straps, we were saying that many citizens in Syria are experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm sure you must have met people over the past few days here in Syria, here in Damascus, who are going through this. In your experience, how common is this among the youth, and what do you think the international community can do to alleviate this pain and suffering?
I think it's between everyone. You know, everyone has their own personal stories, and we hear, you know, the detainees, the displaced, etc., etc. But every single Syrian youth, or Syrian in general, has their personal story and has, you know, lived through the worst 15 years over the past 15 years. So what needs to be done is that the international community needs to step up when it comes to all of these things. And when we want to talk about, you know, the what's to come, psychological support and international support when it comes to medical and psychological support, that is one of the main things that we do need today. You know, the hospitals and the infrastructure here is, you know, below zero. So we do need help of everyone that is able to help at this time. And this is a call to all international actors, institutions, countries, capitals, for everyone to come to Syria and to be part of alleviating this huge wound that every Syrian is living today.
And you know, this is just one thing that we highlighted as part of the graphics we played about a minute ago. 8th graders and 6th graders in Syria, they're not able to compete with the rest of the world right now. Not because they're not capable, they're very capable. It's because of the way they were brought up. They were brought up during a civil war in the country, in a state of war, during the rule of the Assad regime. So when we talk about their future, I mean, in your own experience as someone who is kind of, you know, got stuff together on your own, what would be your message to the Syrian youth in the country, especially to the ones who aspire to, you know, get educated and become someone?
Yeah, I believe that we all have a responsibility today to be a part of the rebuilding of our nation after we're freed from this 50 years of tyranny. It is true, the fact that we don't have the right education, we don't have the right universities or sectors to have those opportunities, but we need to build these tools to then be able to get the right education, to get the right ways to start to build our country. And I mean, there is a huge gap of kids that had to do forced labor, child labor, and that weren't able to get educated. So that's another thing that we need to pay attention to when it comes to the future and how we're going to build this.
Celine, as a Syrian, as an activist, do you feel the international community has done enough for the youth of Syria?
Nope. No, they have not. We have been failed by absolutely everyone. If you want to talk about the UN, if you want to talk about institutions, if you want to talk about even the countries that, took in refugees, there could have been way better ways as to how to deal with a generation that is, that has to integrate into societies, that has to be a part of the working class of wherever they went, or whether it's here. I believe that there was a lot of better ways to do things, but what happened, and today we hope and wish for these people or these institutions to come and help here in Syria on the ground.
So, certainly this is something that everyone is hoping for. Everyone is hoping for a bright future for the youth of this country. Certainly the country has been through a lot, but of course there's always light at the end of the tunnel. Selina Qasim, thanks very much for joining me here on TRT World. Now let's bring in TRT World's Bassem Bounani. He is in Damascus, and now Bassem, you have been following the developments here in Damascus over the past 4 days, and I'm sure you must have seen the electricity cuts and the food shortage and the water shortage that this city is facing. Can you expand on that for our audience?
Actually, I can barely hear you, Jafar, because I'm down the streets here in the middle of Damascus, downtown. As we see in the backdrop, life is back to most parts of the cities. People rushing into their jobs. The economic situation is really a priority for both the Syrian new administration and the Syrian people as well. Syria's new administration has been urging the international community to lift international sanctions and to reintroduce its institutions, the financial institutions, into the international banking systems. As per Syrians themselves, they are really concerned to be left alone at this particular moment. They need help, they need assistance, and they are aware of the need to get more engagement from regional and international powers. That's why visits of regional and world powers, leaders or officials are seen positively here in Damascus.
Right, and Bassem, you mentioned sanctions there. Of course, the country is facing 3 major problems right now. A is poverty, B is hunger, and the third one is displacement. And international sanctions has played a pivotal role in exacerbating the situation, the plight many Syrians are facing right now. Have you spoken to any locals here about what they think about these sanctions and how imperative is it for the international community to lift them?
Unfortunately, Jafar, your sound is almost gone, but we try to assess the situation, or at least to convey part of the mood here in Damascus. The main concerns regarding the economy here, and we met many people in Syria's downtown, including the landmark place here in the downtown, the Hamidiyya market.
Mohammed is still looking for a job. The architectural graduate was only 14 when Syria was mired in war. After Assad's fall, the young Syrian strongly believes that there is still room for him to escape his plight.
We need peace now. People should help each other and refrain from being engaged in anything that could lead to tensions.
But Mohammed is a bit concerned. Syrians, he says, are waiting with a bated breath for a genuine economic upturn.
We now live in a comfortable reality because we got rid of the previous pressures. Before we had a lot of pressure. You work a lot for an unrewarding salary.
Syrians are facing an unprecedented economic crisis. Unemployment topped 14%, according to the now defunct Assad's regime, while the UN warned last year that 90% of Syrians were below the poverty line. Hyperinflation, decimated infrastructure, and investment scarcity are the main roadblocks for a country emerging from more than a decade of war and a dictatorship of more than half a century. There is a vast task ahead. Life is back in the Hamidiyya market, one of Damascus' landmark places. Obviously the crowds are large, but buyers are rare.
Everybody here is happy, but our business is impacted due to the situation in the country. There is a change that's affecting the market.
This situation is pretty much better, at least when it comes to the transactions and sales.
Over the years, purchasing power has collapsed. Syria's new administration plans to increase the public sector's salaries by up to 400%, enough only to readjust the paltry incomes of civil servants.
A lot of banknotes and many trailing zeros, but it's just $50 worth. This is the most staggering signs of the economic crisis in Syria. The Syrian pound could recover, but elements of the answer are not here in Damascus.
The new administration has called on the international community to lift the sanctions Syria inherited from Assad's regime. Under the ousted regime leader, the country was excluded from international banking systems, a legacy Syria's new ruling elite should disband very shortly, and that would be a crucial test for it. Bassam Bounani, TRT World, Damascus.
Now, following its liberation from the Assad regime, a steady influx of displaced residents and tourists are bringing more life to one of Syria's most populous and oldest cities. TRT World's Yunus Demiroglu joins us live from Azaz in Syria. Now, Yunus, you know, when I crossed the border from Türkiye into Syria, we went through Azaz, and I was really surprised to see the development over there.
That's right, Jafar. I mean, this area has been cleared of terrorist activity for some time now. Azaz is very lively, and it's getting even more lively as time passes on. Slowly, people are starting to trickle in. Businesses are growing up. Of course, there is still a lot of work to be done, and it's very apparent from the city center of Azaz that, you know, people are going about their daily lives. There's a lot of business. It's very lively. But when you go outside the reaches of Azaz, then you really start to see the extent of destruction caused by the civil war and by the PKK-YPG terrorist elements. There are several towns around this area, as well as all around Syria, that have been severely affected and contribute to those three main problems that Syria faces, mainly here to the destruction and the displacement of Syrians in this area.
Right, Yunus, you mentioned the PKK-YPG terrorist organization. Of course, Azaz is a city which was liberated from this very organization, and I'm sure people who live around Azaz, even the ones who are in the city right now, they still remember the horrors of the PKK-YPG terrorist organization. Have you spoken to any locals over there? What are they telling you about the threat this organization poses to the region?
Well, of course, and they're still living the aftermath of the effects of the PKK-YPG terrorist organizations. The town you see around me, if it can be called a town now, it's mainly mostly ruins, is completely abandoned. There isn't a single sound that I can hear outside of the birds chirping. It used to be a town of 20,000, and when I look at the old pictures, the old videos that the locals here are showing me, it's very apparent that it was a very lively and peaceful city with shops and a mosque. But today, you can see bullet holes and bombs and mines. Especially one of the main reasons why people are not able to move back into this town is the numerous mines around this area that the the locals are trying to remove with their own equipment, with their own meager equipment. But we filed this report on the displacement of people in Azaz. Let's have a listen.
It's hard to understand the pure joy that emanates from these children in a displacement camp in northern Syria. But they don't know any better. This camp is the only home they've ever known. They're enjoying the afterglow of a new, free Syria, one which their elders wisely see beyond.
We've been living in this displacement camp for 5 years. We've endured many hardships, both in the winter and in the summer. I can't accept living like this. We want to return, but our house has been destroyed. And we can't rebuild it because the land is full of mines.
For the time being, there's less conflict in Syria, but the war has left lingering death everywhere.
We're in the town of Minnek, just outside of Azaz, where this gentleman over here is doing a mine-clearing operation with very rudimentary means. He's throwing his own life in danger with minimal means and trying to clear this whole field of mines. Now, he says right here that these are anti-tank mines and that this field is full of them. But as you can see behind him in the town over there, there's an abandoned town where basically all the homes have been reduced to rubble. But he says that the PKK-YPG terror group has left more personal mines for anyone who is seeking to go home. And he's trying to clear these mines so that the thousands of displaced people in this area can finally and safely return back home.
Yunus has tasked himself with clearing the mines. He says he's disarmed over 1,000 mines in just 1 week. He's lost friends and peers who undertook the same goal.
These mines were left by the PKK. We are trying to clear them so people can return home. We want them to come back, work the fields, and live in their homes. We are doing this with basic means. We need protective gear and proper equipment in order to safely carry on this work. But we will keep doing it to protect our people and our children.
2 children have been killed and 7 more injured by mines in Azaz in the past few days. That, he says, is why he keeps working. Minnak, a once flourishing countryside town, used to be home to thousands. It's been deliberately destroyed so its inhabitants could not return.
I've been living in this town for 65 years. We farm, plant, work here, build houses. This is our home. Normally, I plant 100 tons of wheat here every year. This is where we grew up until the PKK terrorists took over. They destroyed the village, reduced the homes to rubble, cut down the trees and burned the ground. We've been displaced for 8 years. When this town was liberated, we came back to find the town in shambles. I am thankful. Even if it is rubble, we can rebuild. We can rebuild our country.
It will take some time for the residents of Minnak and Syrians all around the country to erase the marks of war. But with the Assad regime toppled and terrorist elements in the region weaker than ever, the conviction and resolve of Syrians may mean a brighter future. Yunus Demiroğlu, TRT World, Azaz, Syria.
Now, talking about the terrorist elements facing Syria, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has said that terrorist groups operating in Syria should either abolish themselves or be liquidated. He has repeated Ankara's position to eliminate the PKK-YPG terrorist group in the country, adding that Ankara is pleased to observe the firm stand of the new administration in Damascus.
There's no place for any terrorist organization, including Daesh and PKK-YPG, in the future of Syria and our region. The PKK-YPG terror group and its extensions will either abolish themselves or they will be liquidated. We welcome the determination of the new administration in Syria. We observe that the Western countries, which until recently stood behind the separatist terrorist organization, are gradually withdrawing their support. I can easily express this. For the PKK-YPG terrorist organization and its extensions, time is shortening, the circle is narrowing, and the end of the road is in sight. No matter which foreign power they cling to, they should know very well that they will not be able to escape the bitter fate that awaits them. After the wall of terrorism is completely demolished, we will create a great solidarity together as Turks, Arabs, and Kurds.
All right, for more on this, let's bring in TRT World's Hassan Abdullah, who joins me live from Aleppo. Now, Hassan, certainly the PKK-YPG terrorist organization, they pose a grave threat to Syria. But when we talk about Türkiye, it poses a grave threat to Türkiye as well. Over the last few decades, the PKK-YPG terrorist organization has claimed tens of thousands of lives across the region. And when we talk about the international community has tried to draw this difference between the YPG and the PKK, even though some officials within the United States have acknowledged this link between these two organizations. So when you talk to locals in Aleppo and other areas of Syria where you have been to, what are they telling you about the PKK-YPG terrorist organization and their activities?
Well, Jafar, when you talk to officials from the new administration, they're not making any distinction between the PKK and the YPG terrorist organizations. They actually see them as the same. Now, for example, earlier we've been to a number of areas where YPG had been controlling the places, and when you go in there, you find pictures of the leader of the PKK terrorist organization, Abdullah Öcalan, who's currently locked up in Türkiye. So, there's no distinction that the Syrian National Army and other groups here make between the YPG and the PKK. They see both of them as terrorist organizations, and there's no distinction. Now, also what's been happening is that around here, I've been talking to a number of officials from the new administration, and they're talking about how there have been mixed signals coming from the SDF, of which the YPG terrorist organization is a key component. They're saying that the SDF is indicating that it wants to talk, but on the other hand, they are saying that they have intelligence that the YPG terrorist organization has its terrorists and a substantial amount of weapons in a number of pockets in which they had agreed to evacuate. And for example, here in Aleppo, there is a pocket where the YPG terrorist organization has significant presence. The officials here are telling me that because of the high population density around those areas, they're reluctant to move in because they don't want any sort of so-called collateral damage around there. So at the moment, they're giving the YPG terrorist organization a chance to leave this area. You've got a few pockets around here that have already been evacuated by this terrorist organization. But when you move to the northeast of the country, and then when you move to the east of the country around Deir ez-Zor, this is where you have presence. But we have been witnessing this pattern where the local population has been standing up against the YPG terrorist organization and its umbrella group, the SDF. And they're saying that they want the new administration to move into these areas and take control there as well.
That's Hassan Abdullah live for us from Aleppo in Syria. Hassan, thank you very much indeed. And now over to the occupied Golan Heights, where the Israeli army continues to patrol the Israel-Syria ceasefire line fence and drove through it into the demilitarized zone. TRT World's Leonie Lakhani looks at how the military activity continues to divide families on both sides of the buffer zone.
Craning their necks to catch a glimpse of their sister beyond the wired fence. These sisters are near the buffer zone in the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights. On the other side of the fence is their sister Sausan in Syria. They see her, a tiny dot on the hill. It's a bittersweet moment.
It hurts. It hurts. It hurts in the heart. It's so close and far at the same time. It's like she's here and we cannot reach her. We cannot hug her, see her, or my uncle and my cousins.
The sisters have lived separately for more than 20 years. Life under the Assad regime and Israeli occupation made it difficult to reunite. And since the fall of Bashar al-Assad, the heightened Israeli military activity in the buffer zone means the sisters remain apart. Video calls have long been a means of staying in touch, but now the sisters are reviving the practice of gathering on what's dubbed the shouting hill to see each other.
It was something a bit different. You see her in person. It feels like you could be there in 2 minutes by car. This is much better, much better.
The practice declined partly due to the Syrian war, but now the divided families of Syria can only hope they will meet once again. Leonie Lakhani, TRT World.
For more on this, let's bring in TRT World's Mohammed Al-Qasim, who joins me live from occupied Golan Heights. Qasim, it seems to me that Netanyahu has used this moment of joy among Syrians to capitalize on Israeli occupation.
Absolutely, Jafar. From the moment the news of the collapse of the former Syrian regime was a reality, Israeli Prime Minister sent his forces well beyond the buffer zone, basically roaming, operating with impunity inside the demilitarized zone, which was agreed on by the 1974 disengagement agreement between the two sides, basically separating Israeli forces from Syrian forces at the time and keeping the UN peacekeepers in the middle, but also operating well beyond the demilitarized zone, basically sending tanks, forces, armored vehicles, even heavy equipment and bulldozers inside Syrian territory, occupying strategic hills and occupying more Syrian territory in the process, but also his tanks and forces rolling through many villages in southern Syria, getting as close as the southern Syrian city of Daraa and its countryside. In some cases, forcing its residents to be displaced out of their villages, out of their homes. In other cases, searching homes in different villages for what they say weapons. And at the same time, Prime Minister Netanyahu, his Defense Minister Israel Katz, and other top Israeli officials are saying that these are temporary, preventative and defensive measures. In fact, Israel has completely occupied Mount Hermon, the peak of it, which Netanyahu was visited about a week ago, saying that Israel will stay there until at least 2025, giving no indication that it will even leave beyond that, saying that Israel must maintain its military superiority and also look after its own security. So Israeli forces is still 2 weeks after the collapse of the Assad regime, operating with impunity well inside Syrian territory, building new roads, allowing Israeli tanks to roll through these territories inside Syria. Even in some cases, where behind me it's foggy and rainy, but we've seen Israeli bulldozers and heavy equipment dig deep, trying to build what seems to us maybe new military bases, Jafar.
That's Mohammed Al-Qasim live for us from occupied Golan Heights. Mohammed, thank you very much indeed. Now, over the past 2 weeks, Israel has conducted dozens of airstrikes across Syria, even here in Damascus, and no one really knows what Israel's endgame is. Of course, the situation in Syria remains fluid, but when you look at the administration in power right now, it seems that things appear to be moving in a positive direction for them. And I think it's clear that the international community is going to play a crucial role when it comes to rebuilding Syria. As part of this special coverage, we will be keeping you up to speed on all the latest developments coming out of Syria. From me and my team here in Damascus, goodbye for now. Back to Istanbul.